Are you suffering from the Great Resignation in the workplace today, where millions of workers are quitting their jobs and leaving your organization? Today's episode will be especially helpful for you then. Hi, I'm Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox, and you're listening to Dear Workplace by InnovatorsBox. Today, I want to start by first saying thank you. Thank you for being a part of Dear Workplace's journey as we reflect on important questions about the workplace. Thanks to your curiosity, questions, and sharing, a few days ago, we reached over 1,000 downloads from 30 countries. We're humbled to hear how you find these insights helpful and reflective. We look forward to continuing to highlight stories and perspectives as you navigate this changing workplace. We also wanted to ask a small favor. We're currently competing in the 16th Annual Podcast Awards and would love your support. Dear Workplace is running for 4 categories and will love your vote for Best Female Hosted Podcast, Best Asian Hosted Podcast, Business, and People's Choice. And it's absolutely free to cast your votes. Go to podcastawards.com and sign up today. Votes will be counted from July 1st to July 31st, 2021. So thank you so much. Now let's get on to today's show. So a week ago, one story became a headline across all news platforms. 95% of workers are thinking about quitting their jobs. That's a lot of people expressing a strong feeling. According to the job site Monster.com, when they polled over 649 employed U.S. workers on June 14th, they learned that 95% were considering leaving their jobs because they are so burned out. That's right. If you feel like you've seen some friends quitting jobs, starting new jobs, and transitioning to new fields, you're sensing it right. CNBC says we are going through the Great Resignation movement. Millions of people prefer to quit rather than going back to the office in which they felt underappreciated and had bad managers. You heard it. People are saying enough is enough. This is why there are dozens of reports and interviews of how recruiters and employers are saying how it's becoming harder to find good talent. The talent itself is speaking about how this is the best time to get your promotions and a jump start on a new career. The key still is, how are you, leaders and companies, making note of this change and designing a workplace that is truly honoring all generations to feel included and encouraged to be who they are? Today, at Dear Workplace, we'll uncover and discuss more about how we can create a workplace of belonging for all generations.
The problem some companies are making is that they're trying to put a Band-Aid on the problem, right? So diversity, great. So we're going to just hire more people of color, people who look different than us. So that's diversity, right, in a sense. But is that equity and inclusion? Absolutely not.
Generation Z and Generation Alpha, I believe the next generation after them is called, they give me hope. They are bold in a way that I don't believe any other generation has been. And they have and are blazing through challenges that I'm not sure my generation would have been able to do.
And I think you're right. Like there's definitely a lot you can learn by taking degrees and studying this stuff, but there's also a lot that is never really going to teach you. You know, we work now across 13 different countries, across almost every time zone in the world, in cultures that are radically different, in languages that are completely different. And I don't think I could have gone to business school to study how to manage a team, which is now 120 people.
Never was I like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. How's your day been? Are you ready to rock and roll? So I knew then that the way I communicate and how my tone is, how my delivery is, has to change depending on who that person is. A lot of my employees are different ages. I have 18-year-olds, I have 25-year-olds, and then I have 55-year-olds. So every day, my tone is changing, my delivery is changing, my approach with them changes.
You very much realize that there are so many different people with many different kinds of experiences, and those shape how you view the world. And oftentimes it's not, they're not necessarily the same as yours. and being open and understanding that people do come from different places, and that actually contributes to the richness of the country we live in and obviously the world we live in.
Hi, welcome to Dear Workplace by InnovatorsBox, where we study trends, changes, and challenges at work. I'm your host, Monica Kang, and today I'm eager to learn more about how we can foster a workplace for all generations as we face the Great Resignation. Let's take a step back. When did you last work at a job in which you felt at home, at ease, and appreciated? What was different? What made you love what you do? If it's been a while, that's probably a warning sign that you have contemplated the great move that everyone is making right now in their careers. And for companies, here is the nuance that you want to remember as you notice this shift. There are 3 elements that make people want to leave jobs. First, they are unhappy at the office. Second, they had time to reflect during the pandemic on what they really want and how they want to live. And third, there is someone else who is providing that inclusive workplace that makes them feel appreciated and valued. Which means if you take the time to nurture your culture and perhaps flip your culture for some of you, you could be that home for all. The office that makes your people feel appreciated, valued, understood, and eager to come to the office as who they are. If you're truly ready to build that workplace, today we want to unfold all the different hows you'd want to think about. The first step is to recognize that building a workplace for all cannot be a band-aid solution. Meet Lai-DuMone, founder and CEO of WorkSmart Advantage, who helps companies engage their teams to rethink inclusive workplace culture through creativity and play. Van shared how from diversity to inclusion to fostering a belonging workplace, many organizations are missing the mark and not thinking about the full picture in the decisions and the actions they are taking.
The problem some companies are making is that they're trying to put a Band-Aid on the problem, right? So diversity, great. So we're going to just hire more people of color, people who look different than us. So that's diversity, right? In a sense. But is that equity and inclusion? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You may have given someone a seat at the table, but are you hearing them? Are you giving them a space for their voice to be heard? Are you attributing their ideas to them? And I think what the other problem is, I feel like companies, human beings, individuals, we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion as an event rather than a process, right? Rather than developmental. We also sometimes look at it as outside of us rather than something we have to fix inside of us first. And I think the first step is to get people to realize, like, we all have biases, right? It doesn't make us a good person, a bad person. We all have biases. And the first part is to be aware of what those are so that we can make changes.
Start from within before outside. What do you feel companies miss the mark?
Oh boy. Okay. So, hang on. Let me. Okay. Maybe I don't care about offending people, but so I think companies are missing the mark oftentimes because it is a box to check, and it really takes intention to make sure that it's not just something you're saying, a phrase that's spoken out, but that it's something that you really are looking at intentionally and seeing how it's affecting the culture of your organization. And I also don't think that they see the loss that they're not feeling the loss. They're not feeling the loss of if we were listening to more voices, if we were allowing everyone to have their ideas heard, if there was true equity inclusion, like, how much better can this organization be? So it was almost like getting stuck in that, like, it's good enough, all right? It's what we know. And then also I feel like there's comfort for people at the top right now, right? It's comfortable for some people who are in power. So why make the change?
Comfortable, as we learned in our last episode, is a dangerous place indeed. From innovation to new ideas, nothing really grows there. Yet Van is spot on. And thank you for your honesty here. Many organizations are not changing because they are comfortable saying, this is how it is. This is why bringing in an amazing speaker or doing a once-in-a-lifetime annual retreat isn't making your people stick around. How you feel at work every day is what matters most. How it felt to be in that team meeting when everyone joked about something I didn't get. versus how my manager spoke up for me when I didn't raise my hand on an idea I pitched. These moments are compounded when we reconcile over time whether our offices are ones that really understand and value how we feel, think, and express. This is why when we think about a workplace for all generations, we have to stop seeing this as a temporary solution. That's a band-aid, as Van said. Rather, I suggest starting from the root. The root, Abraham Kim will share, is that everyone is different. It always has been and always will be. And the more we acknowledge that and focus on being curious about those differences, the more we'll be able to learn about how we could design a place for all those different perspectives, personalities, and work styles.
You very much realize that there are so many different people with many different kinds of experiences, and those shape how you view the world. And oftentimes it's not, they're not necessarily the same as yours. And being open and understanding that people do come from different places, and that actually contributes to the richness of the country we live in and obviously the world we live in. I mean, and it also enriches you personally, right? Because it provides a unique perspective on how the world works. And I think that surprises me at times, and that really excites me. But at the same time, it makes things difficult too, because sometimes you don't see eye to eye. But if one has the value of that, yes, we can come from different places. We not always agree, but we agree to work together, then we can move forward in a constructive way. So.
Abe Kim is the executive director of the Council of Korean Americans and is one of the most thoughtful leaders who has a knack for working across all 5 generations. When I asked him how he collaborates with so many stakeholders and diverse team members, he brought it back to the root. Appreciate how people are different, and that when you face conflict in those differences, get curious instead of seeing that as a conflict. That takes a sense of deep self-awareness and humility as a leader. It's one thing for you to understand how you like to work best, but it's another to always remember that you are working with others. And when you work together with others, you want to be mindful of their preferences, their thoughts, their voices, and their work style too. I asked Abe if he could share more about how we could start reframing how we think about and care for our people. He says to start thinking about their well-being as a whole. Regardless of age, we all want to be understood. Have you taken the time to ask how your people are really feeling at work?
I think at the end of the day, people want to know that you care, and you care them not for whatever utilitarian value that you can offer them for having this kind of relationship, but you really do care about the person, right, and their development, and also care about their health and their well-being as an individual, right? And so I think oftentimes, and I'm sure yourself and many of your audience members encounter where, there are people that want to engage you, but they're trying to get something out of you, right? And they're real only interested as soon as you don't provide any value to them, then it's just, I have no interest in maintaining the relationship. So, and you feel a little used.
Indeed. So how can we make sure we build better non-transactional relationships no matter our position in the office?
I really try to invest in them as an individual, right? And I ask for them to, connect with me in the same way, be authentic, right? And be vulnerable, right? And also be open to constructive criticism and suggestions as well as praise. If I did a good job, great. And if I think you did a great job, I'll praise and celebrate your successes. And so, you can't do this with everyone, obviously. But the people that you do value who they are as a person, and they share common values with you and common mission in life and things like that, I think part of it for us, or at least me, is to connect and invest in them and spend time with them and do things with them.
Make the time to connect and spend time with them. If your people only connect with one another to talk about work, then you're not really giving them the space to connect as a person and as a whole being. I appreciated Abe sharing that we may not be able to provide that in-depth connection and attention to every person, but being intentional in every moment, as much as you can, makes a difference. When something is late, how do you follow up with your colleague? When your peers succeed in a project that you couldn't join, how do you congratulate them? Caring may seem like somewhat of a simple solution, but it takes a lot of intentionality and thoughtfulness that all of us can do, especially as leaders who are in the position to design a workplace culture and experience for all. But you don't have to stop there. Caring can mean thinking about what you say and how you say things to different colleagues, knowing that they will respond and engage to different communication styles. For instance, due to both generational and personality differences, some of my team members prefer to do meetings or phone calls to discuss things, while others want an email or a text update. I realized only thinking about my preferences when designing the workflow is being selfish, as it wouldn't permit other colleagues who wanted different communication style to feel included or heard. This was the lesson Kelly Cunningham learned, especially as she noticed herself handling more pressured conversations during the pandemic as a retail store manager and an entrepreneur.
One thing I can definitely say that I have changed and that my peers have noticed that I've changed is my tone. Your tone and how deep, how serious your tone is, how perky your tone is, can definitely let the other person know how you're feeling or how you mean it. So sometimes, I come off, since I do come off so direct, when I'm talking to someone who might not have that direct personality, I know that I need to change my tone. I know that some of my words, I could be saying the exact same words I would say to someone else, but in a different tone, and they take it completely different. I was one that was very business. When my associates would walk into the store, it was, and I'm very transparent with it. I am one who was, hey, let's go ahead, let's do a temperature check. Let's go ahead, get you clocked in, and let's start our day. Never was I like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. How's your day been? Are you ready to rock and roll? So I knew then that the way I communicate and how my tone is, how my delivery is, has to change depending on who that person is. A lot of my employees are different ages. I have 18-year-olds, I have 25-year-olds, and then I have 55-year-olds. So every day, my tone is changing, my delivery is changing, my approach with them changes. Even from the way I'm learning that, I need to smile a little bit more when I talk, just so they won't look at me like I'm being, so direct, So, just the facial gestures can go a long way with communication. But I do know that because I am so direct, I know that now I have to really learn the person that I'm talking to. So that even though my communication is great and I feel like it's direct, the point is now for my communication to become effective.
Effective indeed. The more you get to learn about your colleagues and peers and really understand what their communication and work styles are like, the better. Kelly is mindful of these nuances as someone who is overseeing a lot of people, both in her day job as a store manager, a Bath & Body Works, and as an entrepreneur, as the founder of the fashion house. She started her company because of the lack of a fashion community in Danville, Virginia, and wondered why can't we have amazing fashion shows and communities outside of New York and Los Angeles? It's incredible. You'll have to check out her work. But she shares she wanted to do both fashion and retail because she loves working with diverse people. I asked how she takes the time to hone her craft as a manager and as an entrepreneur.
As much as I teach and train, I also learn. So, even though I'm a manager, I have a manager. That person has a manager. So, and there's a lot of situations that I have not had the opportunity to come across to know how to deal with them in an expert manner. So I do utilize my peers as a good way to learn from. I am a fan favorite of TED Talks, TEDx's. So I am one who will Google in a minute, how can I find a podcast? How can I find, some extra learnings on what we're ready to, go into now? One thing that my company, we actually touched on, and it was very, I would say fortunate. It was very great to see is we even though we're in the retail, and that's why I say retail teaches you everything in life. We touched base on implicit bias. So the companies, wanted each district to kind of dig into, different things, different topics, different generational things that are going on, and how can we don't have to agree, but how can we all just understand why we might not agree? So when the company took on implicit bias, that's me owning a little bit more of my craft. I was so anxious to touch in on that and do my research and kind of dive into it.
Kelly continues to share more how from unconscious bias training to leadership fellowship programs, she sought out to proactively learn and unlearn. And I'm hearing, again, the key reminder that we heard earlier in this process. It's okay that we have some disagreements with colleagues. The key is rather to seek understanding and be intentional in our actions in what we can do about it to work together. That being said, here's a healthy reminder that none of this is just textbook learning, nor can be a one solution that fits all approach. Blair Glencorse shares a bit more about how, when he looks back at his journey building Accountability Lab for the past decade, his best skills and insights as a leader on how to build an inclusive team across generation was not found in textbooks, but rather from experience and years of practice.
And I think you're right. Like, there's definitely a lot you can learn by taking degrees and studying this stuff, but there's also a lot that is never really going to teach you. We work now across 13 different countries, across almost every time zone in the world, in cultures that are radically different, in languages that are completely different. And I don't think I could have gone to business school to study how to manage a team, which is now 120 people in all of these places in that way. Like, it would be impossible to recreate that almost. So that, is incredible. And you learn so much just from doing and figuring this out as you go. So I found that, a lot of the sort of traditional skills are not always as useful as you might think. A lot of the stuff I studied, which was about international relations and economics, is useful background, but on a day-to-day basis isn't always, the kind of skills that I turn to. The things that are really important, I think, are the slightly bigger, softer skills. Empathy and listening, for example, is really where we begin with everything. How do you become an active listener? How do you really understand what it is that others are facing and think through how best to support some kinds of solutions if you're able? I think that's a really big one. Delegation is a really big one, especially, of course, as you grow. I think there is a tendency to kind of hold on tight to things, particularly if you start and everything is small and all the ins and outs, and then slowly it grows to a point where that's just not possible. You have to understand how to give power away and trust others to follow through, even if it's not exactly as you yourself might have done things. That's another big one. Really being values-based is a big part of what we do. And again, it's not so much a skill, although I think it can be learned to some extent, that values really need to guide decision-making. And I'm finding that's how you keep the sort of heart beating in an organization, if you can build a culture that is based on values.
Build an organization with a heartbeat that is based on values. How is your organization's heartbeat? Accountability Lab is a global translocal network that makes governance work for people by supporting active citizens, responsible leaders, and accountable institutions. Their goal is a world in which resources are used wisely, decisions benefit everyone fairly, and people lead secure lives. What are ways you are maintaining the heartbeat and culture you want for your people? In our last episode, Blair shared how he offers his team access to an online wellness program that is accessible 24/7 so that any colleague can get counseling and wellness resources. Is there anything else that you do?
But of course, there are challenges. Keeping the culture alive, keeping the momentum up in these times is really difficult. So we're trying to find new ways to do that. We now set up kind of wellness email newsletters within the organization every couple of weeks. We're having a lot more intentional meetings of different people within the organization and team meetings, and just trying to connect to each other in all sorts of new ways virtually, which are challenging. And I think that's the elements of all of this that no one seems to have quite worked out. How do you recreate the magic of in-person meetings when you can't be together? But we're getting there, slowly, and I think it is pushing us to reinvent some of our systems in ways that are useful.
Let your workplace's workflow and environment reflect the values that you stand for. What do you stand for, and what workplace are you really creating? That intentionality really matters to create a place for all. And guess what? There is another thing Blair reminds us is key in this culture development. It's patience.
Being patient, it takes a long time. I think there's a sense, and I certainly had this sense at the beginning, that things are going to happen really quickly, that you'll get, so much done. But the kind of thorny problems that we are dealing with in our own different ways take a long time. The change can take years. There are conversations I started almost a decade ago that are only now kind of leading to some sort of change one way or another. So that's another big piece of things. It's to kind of keep the faith and be patient, because slowly, if you're doing the right things and you're building the right networks and creating the right kind of change, then eventually it will pay off.
Persistence, patience, and thoughtful caring makes a difference. This goes back to Van's note on how, if we truly want to design a workplace for all generations, we shouldn't take a shortcut. Plan for the marathon. And while at it, take a moment to really understand all generations, including our younger Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Brandi Nicole Johnson, executive coach and head of learning and development at DoorDash, shares why she is excited about our new young workforce.
Generation Z and Generation Alpha, I believe the next generation after them is called, they give me hope. They are bold in a way that I don't believe any other generation has been. And they have and are blazing through challenges that I'm not sure my generation would have been able to do. So I'd like to think of millennials as the last generation to play outside. So I still remember life before cell phones, before everybody had one. I still remember dial-up internet. I still remember the Rolodex and no one having like a true contact list. I still remember bulletin boards being everywhere because there was no Pinterest. And so because of how technology has completely transformed the way we live, the way we move, the way we are, I also think that not only is there a different level of scrutiny that they are navigating very, very well, but they also have a different level of boldness. And I hope that boldness falls upon every generation, but specifically when I think about Generation Z and Generation Alpha and what they really have an opportunity to do, I believe the world is a better place because they are here. And I only hope that leaders that are currently in place make sure that they leave the world better than they found it. And so for me, that's something I'm thinking about. I'm not necessarily thinking about us. I'm thinking about those that come after us. I still want there to be a world for them to have, for them to continue to cultivate, and for them to continue and invest in. I want them to be able to have the same access to opportunities, if not more, because more has become available by way of us deciding to live differently, to work differently, to be different. I think there is a tremendous opportunity for us to rise to the occasion in the same way that we've watched that generation.
We are here for not just the current generation, but for the future generations. That should be within all employers and leaders' mindset. If we are only thinking about what we know and what we've done before, how are we thinking about what else could be done? The bonus that we have in each generation isn't something we can recognize by interpreting from only one lens. We want to see that across all lenses. So as Brandi said, there is hope. But it's up to us to create that hope. Whether you are a leader, entrepreneur, or a young professional, we all can help create that workplace together by caring for one colleague at a time, by asking and taking the time to learn more about how they really feel. Perhaps if we all did 1% more of that each day, we'd have a better world and a workplace that we wouldn't mind getting up in the morning for. And if this 95% massive job quitting situation is one wake-up call for your organizations, don't let this be a moment you pass by. Learn from this moment what you could do differently to see a world where we could all thrive, no matter where we work. The choice is yours. Thanks for joining us today. This is Monica Kang, your host at Dear Workplace. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Thanks to our guests for sharing your insights on this topic. Next, I'm curious to explore skills in the workplace. Should we learn how to code more? What kind of people skills should we focus on? Should we not worry about getting educational degrees? Bring your questions and thoughts, and I'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Monica Escobar, the visual brand designer at InnovatorsBox, and I hope you're enjoying Dear Workplace. I'm passionate about design, and I get to dive deep into my creativity while designing for InnovatorsBox. This show is brought together by our awesome team: producers Saren O, audio engineers Sam Limer and Ravi Ladd, Kelly Gravo on marketing, website designer Akriti Pandi, myself, graphic designer, and Luke Helder on music. And of course, Dear Workplace is hosted and directed by Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox. To continue the conversation of reimagining the workplace, visit us at innovatorsbox.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share. We'd love to hear what you enjoy and what I can convince Monica to talk about in our next episodes. See you next week.